I was giving a presentation on a technological cooperation between South countries and North-South countries. And I gave some case studies, for example, Japan, India and Malaysia, and also China's interest. Because what I was supposed to do was also to talk about the implications of China's involvement, and so this I brought in as well. Well, my conclusions are, now I'm losing it. My conclusions were that how to achieve a more balanced partnership despite many disparities between developing and developed countries. This is particularly a very sharp problem with developing countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and so on. Even within the South, there are great differences, for example, between Vietnam and Singapore. Now, the second conclusion I had was the unfair competition because of state and centered economies, and that means, of course, China. China is competing in a very different way with countries like Malaysia, India, and how to deal with this. The third one is the geopolitical obstacles, and that is, of course, the complex relations between China and Vietnam, China and the Philippines, and of course the US-China rivalry, sanctions politics, and so on. Then exclusion. China, artificial intelligence trains its algorithm on China-specific, China-sourced context. But this is not only China, excuse me, which does this, but also, for example, Google's AI assistant Gemini remains silent on topics including, for example, human rights or the situation rights abuses in Xinjiang. And finally, the all-encompassing influences of IT, AI risks wide control by outside countries and big enterprises. So these issues I have illustrated with various case illustrations.
Your forecast about the situation in the near future in East Asia and Europe, Japan and China?
Well, first of all, the gap between South and North will widen. I mean, there will be a gradual increase in the technological level of the South, but also of the North. And I think because the North is advancing faster, the gap will widen rather than, will become a bit smaller maybe. And here things get very complicated because you have to look at sectors. The South India, for example, particularly India, is advancing very well on software application. There are lots of engineers, software engineers in Japan, for example. Japan is becoming very dependent even on India. So this gap, one has to be very specific about it. Chip production, for example, is a very complex process, and there are high-end sectors and low-end sectors. So the low-end sectors, of course, will be increasingly being taken over by developing countries in the South. Europe, I don't know what role Europe will be able to play in the future. There are huge investments. Germany, for example, attracting Taiwanese chip producer. The US is trying to do the same. There is onshoring instead of offshoring, but offshoring will continue. Then there's raw materials, which are also necessary for chip production, of course. So it's a very complex picture. It's very difficult to predict, particularly with the ongoing strategic changes, the election of Trump. We don't know to what extent he will disturb the whole network of cooperation, of competition, etc.
The Europe place in that map. What's in your opinion Germany and EU situation compared to the USA, India, China, Japan, in that technological competition?
Well, there are various levels. There is, for example, the American sanction policy, which, of course, has a negative impact on the way Europe can be internationally active. For example, the Netherlands is very important for a certain part of chip production, and they had to follow America's lead in sanctions against China and so on. Then Germany, for example, has given a lot of subsidies to several IT companies, but it didn't work very well so far. So just throwing money at something is not the right way.
And why is not working so good?
Oh, these are very specific reasons, because one company, I forgot the name now, is in difficulty. And so they couldn't start the project for which they got the subsidies or were promised the subsidies. Japan has also problems like this, because Japan wanted to attract the same Taiwanese company. So, I mean, just throwing money at it, that doesn't work. You have to have also the qualified people, you have to the educational sector, etc. So it's because it's very strange, because we were until recently we were talking about the slim state. The state should withdraw and leave more to the private sector, and now we are actually going into the contrary direction because of this competition in IT, and this is very strange. This is very strange because our countries are not like China, which are state directed and so on, which have experience. Doesn't always work, of course, but well, they have more experience. We are now moving from this tendency to slim state to, again, interventionist state. So we have to see how that will turn out.